had like a million ideas what you could do if you had, this rich 3D representation of the world. And then at some point, you started to research. You said, well, there's Google Earth. Well, fantastic. And then you tried to use that and it was not allowed. It was not possible. So I couldn't use Google Earth for anything. I was like, well, this is stupid. They spent millions and millions and millions to build this data set. Why can they not let people use on top of that?
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 397. Are digital twins about to change the way we see the world? For that question, we head to Zurich to speak with Nilson Kufus, CEO and co-founder of Nomoko. Nomoko creates digital twins that can be implemented for everything from urban planning to music festival security. The company is on a mission to make the physical world accessible as a digital ecosystem using digital twins. With a focus on real estate, Nomoko strives to create virtual copies of individual buildings, larger districts, or even whole municipalities. This helps customers to visualize their projects and to gain informed insights in order to make the right decision at any time. Nilson has a degree in liberal arts and sciences from the University College Maastricht, where he built his curriculum around business, artificial intelligence, and media. He has been a Digital Shaper of Switzerland 2019, a TedX Salon speaker, and guest lecturer at ETH Zürich and FH HWZ. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Nilson talks about Nomoko, the company's quest to build a digital twin of the world, and how digital twins will revolutionize the way we see and interact with the world. But before we hear from Nilson, I want to thank those of you who have supported my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And by the way, if you have a great story on the use of drones that you'd like to share on a podcast, contact me at randy@droneradioshow.com. Now let's learn how digital twins will shape our future with Nilson Kufus of Nomoko. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Nilson to introduce himself.
I'm Nilson Kufus, co-founder of Nomoko. I'm the CEO of the company. We started in 2015 and we pursued a vision of creating a digital twin of the entire planet.
Nilson, tell us more about Nomoko. What does the company do?
What if the whole world was available as digital twins? What if you would have a complete physical replica in the digital world? What could you do with that? Would it be possible to build a GTA 5 in your hometown? Would it be possible to automate real estate? Would it be possible to simulate self-driving cars? This is really what got us into it. And at the core of this, for us as a company, was always the existence of a very rich, very up-to-date, very detailed 3D model, preferably at scale. That was always the starting point for us of digital twins. And I think we always thought about it not for one particular building or factory, but really on a more urban scale, connecting in the end different pieces. And that's what we've been pursuing from the very get-go, with, as you can imagine, a lot of ups and downs in terms of technology readiness and everything there is. And today, I think we're very focused on delivering 3D models to different customers, from train stations, which is very kind of small for us, up to entire cities, up to multi-cities. That's what we're doing. We're doing that both on demand and with a database format, where in the end we have an entire database of Swiss cities, for instance, already acquired. And what is coming new, basically, let's say continuation of our quest, is making it possible to render, to visualize those large-scale 3D models then on the web as well. especially for photogrammetry. This has always been a massive hassle to actually get this going and have those beautiful photogrammetry models live and visualize on the web. And especially with, in conjunction with something like Mapbox or other geospatial tools, where then you can switch on data layers, you can switch them off, you can interact with everything. That's the next thing that's coming. So we will release that towards Intergeo this year and make that publicly accessible, and already very happy with the first results we have for ourselves.
And you're using drones to collect the data.
I think that was one of the first things we decided, is that drones are the right platform in order to do that. If you drive around streets, this will take a long time. I mean, you know it from Google, from Apple, from all the big tech companies doing it. It takes a gigantic effort. The other route with airplanes, you don't get the detail, you don't get the fine-grained elements in that, neither for updates nor for the quality. And that's where we settle in very early on for drones. So we capture everything from drones, we capture everything in that sense aerial. Of course, there's some shortcomings to it. So if you really want to have a street level perspective, you either have to add this data component for those specific digital twins, or more commonly, you then have a little bit less elegant data on that really street level experience. But still, today, if you fly cities, it's 1.5 centimeters resolution in terms of texel size. So we still get very, very decent results.
Can you tell us about the business model? Are you collecting data to sell on demand or when contracted by a client?
I mean, we really have both business models. On the one side, as I said, we started to collect cities where we think there is going to be a lot of demand ourselves. And on the other front, of course, we're not in the position to now, within 30 days, have all cities on the planet captured with drones, unfortunately. So we do this also on demand. So especially if it's regions we don't have a database yet, then cities, municipalities, urban planners, but even big tech companies, they can come to us and say, listen, we want to have this region, and then we capture it and add it to our database, but do this on demand in the first place.
What are the most promising applications for digital twins?
We have seen a constant kind of shift to 3D. I think communication is a massive benefit. So especially when we talk about the real estate industry, urban planning, city planning, architecture, in the end, we are importing the BIM files or CAD files into the photogrammetry models. And then you have basically a vision of the future, which you can communicate with anyone. It's not 2D plans, which are hard to understand. It's not some drawings, it's not some renderings, which just have one perspective, the one that the architect chose to kind of convince everyone. It gives you a complete possibility to communicate the future in a way everyone understands. And we had town hall meetings with people who have been in town halls for 30 years and listening to these urban planning projects and said, it's amazing. For the first time, I'm actually understanding what the people in the front are trying to tell me. And I think that's a massive, gigantic value of digital twins today. It's just visually communicating anything that has to do with future projects. It's such a simple use case. It's getting devalued so many times. And every time that people then see it in action, we just had an example where a building permit was not given for 5 years. And with, using the digital twin in combination with the CAD drawings and 3D files, within one afternoon, that was cleared. I mean, you cannot put really a value behind this. This is, the difference between having a construction project or not.
How easy is it for clients to get a digital twin from Nomoko?
The entire process of ordering digital twins has to get much, much easier for end consumers. It doesn't have to be like a long conversation. So what we've done is essentially you choose your area of interest or the area that you want to have a digital twin of, and that's a map selector. So on a map, you can basically draw what you want. And then from there, you get that delivered. We will get still a quick call with our sales team, asking a couple of questions in which context this is used, what file formats do you want to have. But then we're basically off to go. And from there, you get it delivered in a very convenient format. We deliver everything web-based these days. So you can have it as a web link. You can download the data from there. You can already view it in your browser and already get a first feeling for it. And that's, of course, then where things are getting extended. We have people who want to have it in Twinmotion delivered, as an example. We want to have people who have it in Blender delivered. That's then, in the end, depends on how you are using digital twins in the first place.
What if you don't have the data in your system? Do you then contract with a pilot to collect the data for you?
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly how it works. So essentially, if we don't have the data yet, then we collect it on that request. The way this works today is we have in-house pilots, which are covering some of the work, but also we're starting to work together much more with third-party pilots, a bit like an Uber setup from a conceptual point of view, but especially as we're operating most of our customers here in Europe and are just starting in the US now, the part which is important is the whole legislation. So you need to have permits in place with the different flight authorizations, which is not always that straightforward. But I think we have a massive track record now with a lot of flights over cities and populated areas. So we manage all of this. And then the pure execution of the flight plans go to the pilots. And today we even provide the systems. So on a pilot level, it's really, in that sense, just executing the flight plans and making sure that you comply with all the rules and sets that we laid down. That's one of those processes we standardize as well internally, exactly to solve one of those questions on how to be able to fly a lot of drones every day in urban environments. You have to standardize all of that regulatory compliance to actually make it work.
So in Europe, you worked with the various regulatory agencies on how you're going to fly over urban areas. Then you make that part of the requirements for the drone pilots.
We as a company, we get the permit. They have to exactly follow the steps. There's a flight manual to it that we can then guarantee that the operations have been done in the way that we got the permit from.
How many regulatory authorities are there in Europe?
In theory, one. So in theory, it's the SORA framework, which is valid across all of Europe. But then you have the national, aviation authorities, which are the final permission givers. And of course, there you have every European country has their own authority. Now, in theory, everything drone related is organized for all of Europe in the same way, under the same framework. But as you can imagine, if you have different government authorities, there's always then in the execution small differences. So reality shows us that you have to have relationships with every single one. We're now operating in Europe. I think we did operations in almost 7 countries or 6 countries. And then, of course, over time, you also get a lot of credibility because the other authorities already approved it and it gets easier over time. So, that's unfortunately part of the game.
What type of clients use digital twins?
I think we really have 4 essential groups in terms of customers. One is, let's say, the smallest ones. These are property developers, real estate industry at large, from architects to investors who use this to communicate their new real estate projects. These are independents. These order sometimes 2-3 projects, sometimes 10 projects a year. But in that sense, really like a much smaller scale. Then you have governments and urban planners. It depends a bit. Sometimes the governments are ordering. Sometimes the urban planners themselves are ordering. So it's a very interesting combination. It really depends on the location for urban planning purposes and to support their work. Then you have, or at least for us, we have the big tech companies, which are picking up as customers. And on the other side, infrastructure providers. So really the companies which have a lot of physical infrastructure, from train stations to also municipalities in that particular part, but anything which you have as physical infrastructure.
Is privacy an issue? And if so, how is it handled?
Yeah, always. I mean, I think this is almost always one of the early questions we get is how are you guys dealing with that? Are people visible in the models? How do you deal with private information? I mean, if you record at that level of detail, at least in theory, you could have details about people in the models. I think the good thing is that the process that we chose in terms of processing the 2D imagery into 3D models, within that process, everything which is non-static is completely removed. So any human which does a little bit of movement within a period of 15 minutes is basically removed from the scene automatically. That's the beauty of it. And with those steps, you have almost a 100% guarantee unless it's a dead body. But then I guess privacy, that entire part is an entire complete different question. So that's the case. A body moves, even if you're sleeping, even if you're sunbathing, even if you're doing anything, it moves, and then automatically all of that is taken out. And we've done with almost all of our big customers through exactly that question, how can we guarantee holding up privacy in the first place? I think there, what is also important, we don't publish, sell, or distribute our 2D imagery, which we use as a source for the photogrammetry. So that's something which stays private. That's something which basically stays with us. So that's hidden. So in that sense, we comply on that front on a full scale. Always a topic, less today than maybe 2-3 years ago. I think generally that topic is people are getting a bit tired of it. But yeah, that's the overall part. Or they're getting more used to the technology in the first place.
Have you ever had an instance where someone wants to have their building removed from the data set?
Yeah, there was one company that didn't want to have their headquarters in our data, and then we removed it. And then they said, well, this is much more obvious than if it's there. I said, well, I just wanted to have it removed. So that's your choice. But that was really one incident, and then everything else has been no request so far.
What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome in building the company?
It's really threefold. I mean, there was one part which we, as a company, were extremely lucky just in terms of location. Is we started in Switzerland. Switzerland had very good drone regulations to start with, where we could experiment a lot early on. I think a lot of the work we've done without that would not have been possible. I mean, if I take the restrictive regulation in a lot of countries across the globe, we would not have had the ability to capture large cities on a daily basis with drones and show that this is possible to do safely. So there, I'm blunt and I'm going to say we were just lucky that we started in Switzerland. There was no strategic interest in that. It was just pure luck. That's now helping us a lot to overcome the whole regulatory frameworks in Europe and also in the US. I think having a track record and being able to show that we've flown that much overpopulated areas is helping us tremendously in order to build up the case that we can safely operate the drones in the first place. So regulation is a challenge and will keep being a challenge with things changing. We would love to fly BVLOS, but we can't from a regulatory standpoint yet. So that's always going to remain a challenge. I mean, it's a constant battle. What is possible today? What is possible tomorrow? Adjusting the systems, adjusting the workflows. So I think until this gets settled and we really have like a BVLOS framework, that's going to stay the same. You have to be on top of the regulation. I think it's just a job you have to do. My co-founder, Vincent, he's the president of the Drone Association in Luxembourg, to also have a clear, very early on his taps on what is happening on that front. So that's how we try to be really on the forefront of that. And then it's technology. I think what has evolved over the last 5 years is amazing. And I think it went from, we started really with the acquisition challenge of just getting 1.5 centimeters in terms of GSD done. That was kind of the first challenge that we had to solve. And this was much more linked to hardware and operations. At which altitude do you fly? What hardware do you put in terms of sensors? What is the overall, weight of the system? Can you still put a parachute? What gives good results? What doesn't give good results? How much overlap? What is the angles? How oblique do the cameras have to be? So this was a lot of trial and error, to be honest. So that was the first challenge. The second challenge on the tech side was just to process that large amount of imagery, convenient and scalable way, and automating this. Most photogrammetry softwares, we don't produce our own photogrammetry software, for instance, but we have our own pipeline, which is automating a lot of things and doing that. I mean, they fail from time to time. And if you have something, a process running for, 72 hours and suddenly it fails, you have to run it again. That's not scalable. That's something you cannot deploy on that front. So we had to find a lot of ways on how to make this smart and process that. And then last but not least is how to display the data. Because in the end, if you produce, beautiful, high accuracy, high resolution photogrammetry data and you cannot show it to the customers, it's kind of pointless, So that wasn't the last, I would say, not the last. I mean, there's many more to come, but that was the foundational tech challenges we had to overcome. Many times it's also the evolution of the ecosystem, which brings solutions where suddenly things get possible.
What's the challenge from the business side?
Is making digital twins be an important and integral part of those different businesses and being in the right spots where you get, the first big contracts and where you can actually get the customers in a regular form onboarded and use those digital twins and understand their needs and understand which customers are ready. I mean, when we started in 2015, the word digital twin didn't exist. And we had to do a lot of convincing that 3D data is something that is beneficial. And I think that's a massive hassle. this is getting much easier the last 2 years. I think with the overall adoption, this is changing a lot, but you really have to do a good amount of work to be ahead of the game and know which industries are picking up and where you can scale the business. I think that's a big challenge, and you just have to try a lot. I think there's no other way than just trying, finding out new use cases and doing this.
In order to make digital twins really flourish in the marketplace, what do you think has to happen to speed the adoption?
I mean, it has to become more convenient. That's the bottom line. And I think convenient is two elements. Data needs to be readily available. That's like point one. If you always have to capture digital twins kind of on demand, there's always a time gap, even when we now reduce it for small areas to like a week. Even if that's the case, you will have this delay, no instant gratification. So readily available data. And the second part is easy to use tools. Easy to use tools to build applications on top. That's the two things. If that's there will be a lot of digital twin applications. And the more applications are there, the more is the demand on data, the more is the demand on tools. So then it becomes this flywheel effect. And then I think that's what we now have to crack. And then it's going to be, I don't think any application which is using maps in 5 years from now will not have 3D incorporated and digital twins incorporated. You will not order your Uber anymore at an airport, not knowing where you have to go. It will be showing you exactly where you are and the exact pickup spot. It will not be like an abstract map, which is difficult to understand. I think that's going to be a thing of the past.
What inspired you to start the company?
Yeah, it was really this notion of what if we had the physical world just as a complete digital replica. And I was still studying at the time, and I remember this imagination, what if we could play GTA 5 in this small university town, or what if, movies would be completely three-dimensional, volumetric. At the time, we had a lot of light field discussions. That was kind of the hype with Lightro coming up as a new camera system. What could you do with that? And I think as a student, I had like a million ideas what you could do if you had, this rich 3D representation of the world. And then at some point, you started to research. You said, well, there's Google Earth. Well, fantastic. And then you tried to use that, and it was not allowed. It was not possible. So I couldn't use Google Earth for anything. I was like, well, this is stupid. They spent millions and millions and millions to build this data set. Why can they not let people use on top of that? And of course, nowadays, we know how complex it is, how expensive it is. So there's reasons for that. And I think then the next step was, how can we make this possible? And how can we make it possible with even more precise data, even more visual fidelity? And how can we give, everyone the possibility to build basically their digital twin app and make that happen? That was really was driving us from the very get-go.
When did you first realize that this could actually work as a business?
This is going to sound very stupid, but I think we were always convinced with my co-founder as well that the value of this data is going to be tremendous. It's going to be used in so many different applications. And from the very get-go, that was never our worry. But then I think the question was more how to bridge this time in between. We always knew once you have the full planet covered, once you have all of this, you can extract in so many different ways. The question of how to get that basically done before you're in this position. So how can you do this on smaller scale, more with on-demand customers? That was, I think, the question we spent a lot of time or experimentation solving. And to this day, I remember one of the first trials we did in the real estate industry. And that's where we really started the adoption of 3D digital twins for us. And there was this guy, and we just said, we would just try it. We don't even invoice this guy. He put his new house, which was planned, into the CAD model. And I had the first call with him during the pandemic. And he looked at it and he said, and he paused. And I was like, oh, this is, we did something wrong. This is not happy. It's like, I have to get my wife. I have to call her. It's like, this is the first time I can imagine the project, how it's going to be there and how this is going to be when it's built. I have to get her. And they were almost speechless in front of the screen because they could have that in a very interactive way. And I think that was the moment where we knew, okay, this is, if there's that emotional reaction with some people, there's going to be others who will have exactly the same emotional reaction. And that was really the starting point. And then, of course, the second stage was really the last 12 months where we were able to get the first international customers cross-border, where we knew now we are ready from a technology, a cost point. This is a challenge I didn't mention before, just getting the cost down. I think that was a massive hassle. And knowing now we can attract companies, large companies, which, want to have multiple locations. We're not talking about like 10 digital twins. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of digital twins. When we got that, we knew this is now the industry is ready to scale.
To date, what's been the most rewarding experience for you?
I think the step now where we have the first companies who start to build applications on top of our digital twins. And when that started to happen and the people approached us and said, listen, guys, this is amazing. I have this and this idea for my particular, business, for my particular industry. It's a problem I know there is. I want to solve this. Can you help us build an application? That was exactly the moment where we said, now we're getting very close to the vision we had 7 years ago, that we enable this ecosystem. We enable other people to actually build what they think is valuable for their industry on top of our stack. Yeah, that was for me, the most rewarding moment.
Have any of the major geospatial companies discovered what you're doing?
With some of them, we have very close exchange. Take Esri, of course. This is something a lot of municipalities are using. Our path is to be compatible from a data point of view with all the ArcGIS systems. It shouldn't be that, a municipality for their urban planning purposes now has to shift their complete technology stack and GIS stack. It's our joint job between Esri and ourselves to make the data compatible to ArcGIS, and then have all of those municipalities get the best of digital twins. I think that's the nice part. For a lot of players, we are very synergetically. So,
what do you attribute to the success in being able to fly in urban areas?
First of all, I think we've worked directly with the authorities very, very early on. The first time we heard that SORA might come, we called up the National Flight Association of Switzerland and said, listen, can we collaborate on how to make this work, before anyone had a blunt idea how this is going to be in implementation. So we were on that very, very, very early on. And then basically, once we knew that Switzerland would postpone the introduction of SORA, we then contacted Luxembourg as our European hub to do the same. And we said, well, listen, we have these learnings. Why don't we collaborate to make the first applications together? And they were very happy. In order to implement the framework, they need to have showcases and they need to have projects and they need to have this in the first place. So very close collaboration, I think, was an extremely important part. So remember, we had one supplier, which there was no certification body for this. So we helped both the Flight Association as well as that supplier to find someone to certify that system. And I think, that willingness to push, that was a big contributing factor. And now, especially that we have so much track record. We just flew so many times over cities and can show that we did that. We logged all our flights from the very get-go. We had one incident which we reported exactly how it was to the authorities. We didn't have to, but we still reported it. I think building this trust and really showing everything we do, that was the key success on that front.
What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think the first part is really to understand the business and where today you can make money. It's still, I think, an industry which is evolving and growing, and it's still in its early stages. So a lot of the things we haven't seen yet in terms of potential. So that would be my key advice. Really, really, really understand what you have to deliver to the customer. And is it a customer you can get one time, or you can get multiple times? Or is it a customer that can scale across different countries? Is it a customer that, can scale in volume? That would be my first advice for any entrepreneur in this space. I think we have this general notion in the future that's going to be big, but it's going to be the time in between, how you bridge that and how you can generate revenues early on, which will be the key to your success. And get my hands dirty. That would be the other part. Just do it. Just get the first flights in.
What's next for Nomoko?
Two paths, essentially. One is to just expand our footprint in terms of data acquisition, get more pilots into our ecosystem, even independent pilots, cover more locations, always increasing the quality. This is always a quest we have, unlocking new industries. So that's on the data side. And then really important to unlock the 3D streaming library that we're launching, that anyone can build with your own or with our 3D data, just awesome applications, web-based, JavaScript-based. I think that's our next big launch in the next 6 months, and really enable the whole community to leverage the beautiful 3D data that is out there and can be produced today.
And for my final question, Nilson, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry?
I think regulators should pave the way that we can really have that technology adopted on a large scale. I think we're talking a lot about, our drones are often used for non-enterprise parts, but I truly believe that mapping or the Earth observation industry will be switched upside down with drones. I think in 10 years, it will be drones delivering almost 90% of the Earth observation data out there. So get in on the train, start mapping, start creating awesome data, and then that's the future.
That's it for episode 297. That's it for episode 397 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Nilson Kufus of Nomoko. I want to thank Nilson for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Nomoko, or want to connect with Nilson, check out the webpage at nomoko.world. And Nomoko is spelled Nomoko. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gores.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.